So I'm just getting a couple of minutes here. I see people starting to come in. Once I see the number stop going up a little bit, I will start talking. All right. Oh, there we go. Goodness gracious. All right, looks good. We have a lot to cover today, and I don't want to take up any too much time here on my end. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the National Conference of Women's Bar Associations for our Law Firm Leaders edition of our Good Guys program. My name is Shiloh Taberge. I am the president of the NCWBA board this year. I am a shareholder and co-chair of the Labor and Employment Group at Bernstein Youre here in Portland, Maine. The NCWBA, for those who aren't familiar with it, is a unique organization. Our members are women's bar organizations throughout the United States. We work for equality in the legal profession and in society by supporting those organizations. We're holding our Good Guys program today to kick off our annual board retreat, and it's being held here in Portland, Maine. We'll spend the rest of this weekend organizing, planning exciting ways to connect with all of our member organizations and the legal community over the upcoming year. We're hoping to also have some lobster. That seems to really be on everyone's mind. But planning lots of in-person events and virtual events to connect with everyone as we move along in our year. We also are lucky enough this afternoon to have just some fabulous speakers, and so a limited amount of time, and so I'm going to let them get started. We're going to kick it off with Teresa Beck. So Teresa is the president-elect of the NCWBA. She was one of the co-creators behind NCWBA's Good Guys program. She's also a shareholder and co-chair of Diversity and Inclusion at Kleindienst Law, a firm headquartered in San Diego, handling litigation in the states of California, Arizona, Nevada, and Washington. Teresa's an AV preeminent rated attorney by Martindale-Hubbell. And I guess as you can imagine from everything I've said, she's passionate about the advancement of women in the workforce, work-life management, and a lot of DEI causes. So she's serves as a board member for a number of organizations whose missions align with her interests, including, luckily for us, the NCWBA and the Women Advocate Committee of the ABA's litigation section. So thanks, Teresa. I'll let you get us started.
Thank you so much, Shiloh, and thanks to all of our great speakers here today. You're going to hear from all of them really soon, and I need to figure out how to share my screen real quick, if my mouse will cooperate. Let's see. Sorry about that. There we go. Well, welcome everybody to our Good Guys program today. Just as a quick reminder, you're going to hear from the following people. And I'm sorry, my cursor is not working very well. There we go. So this is the agenda for today. First, a presentation by Cheryl Axelrod. I'll talk about her a little bit more in a minute. Then these fabulous good guys, Ben Wilson, Bob Bodian, Jeff Fireman, Vince Slawski, Joan 14 is going to be our moderator. Before we get there though, we wanted to give you a little history of Good Guys and where this movement comes from. So Good Guys was created by the National Conference of Women's Bar Associations. We had assistance from the National Diversity Council. If you haven't heard of the National Diversity Council, highly recommend, check them out. There's chapters in almost every state and in all the big cities. They created our great logo, the Good Guys logo. Good, by the way, means guys overcoming obstacles to diversity. To understand Good Guys, it's helpful to know about the National Conference of Women's Bar Associations. And this isn't quite up to date. We're going to be working on adding a couple more states to this, but you can see that we have member organizations all over the country. And this is where our members who are involved in creating programs like Good Guys come from. It's where our programs come from, is all of these women leaders all over the country. We get together in normal times in person and powwow and talk about the things that are impacting women lawyers, diverse women lawyers. We have virtual membership meetings. We do webinars. We've had some really great webinars with authors, like the author of White Fragility, and many others. We do key national programs like Good Guys and Food from the Bar, women's law groups and law schools. Law students can join for free. So we're really trying to encompass all women lawyers. Women lawyers, if you've been in the rooms where we do our programs, these are the kinds of things we talk about. The programs that have been created in the past to address the lack of women advancing in the profession. So we know all about leaning in and mentoring and affinity groups and initiatives. But what we also talk about in women's groups is that the studies show if the pace continues at the same rate as back in 2015, and actually in 2021, there's an argument it slowed, that women won't even reach 30% equity partners, not even 30%, until the year 2181, which is about 6 generations of women from now. And that's not even 50%. So in our groups, we talk about how this is really too long to have to wait, and we'd like to do something about it. We see that these initiatives we've been involved in are failing, that change isn't happening, and we know that for something to change, something needs to change. And we realize that guys in leadership are often missing from the conversation and are missing from developing solutions to the problems. And so we created Good Guys, Guys Overcoming Obstacles to Diversity, to invite male leaders to a seat at our table, to invite you to our discussions, to share our perspectives with you, to showcase you as good guys, guys overcoming obstacles to diversity, to include you in developing strategies, and to really integrate the discussion, because we can only get so far with our women's organizations. We really need male leadership to participate. We also talk about the financial benefits of diversity, because we know that male leaders, and frankly, so do female leaders, really care about return on investment and making money in our law firms and in our companies and organizations, and what male leaders can do to disrupt bias right now, as well as women leaders. So we have a toolkit. It's at goodguysinlaw.com. Please check it out. It's free. It's developed to be a nationwide program that can be replicated by anyone who wants to do it. They just need to tell us they're going to do it. We've done Good Guys programs all over the country. And today we add Maine to the states that have done Good Guys programs. If you don't see your state on our map, we'd love to put it there. You can talk to me about doing that. Google me, LinkedIn, find me, find Cheryl, find Shiloh. We'd all love to help you. Last thing is, I wanted to do a quick shout out to our Good Guys influencers. This is a new effort by NCWBA to engage more male leaders to attend our program. So we've recruited Good Guys influencers who in turn have invited more male leaders to the program today. So big shout out to Jessica Brown, Jerome Crawford, Jason Schwartz, Tim Williams, Phil Rudolph, and who am I covering up? Bill Saylor with Qualcomm. Thank you all so much for your efforts, and a big shout out to all the Good Guys influencers who have increased our audience today. And with that, I'm going to quickly introduce Cheryl Axelrod. Check her out on LinkedIn, check out her posts, her videos. She is selflessly, continuously volunteering information about how we can make the workplace more inclusive, not just for women, but for diverse men, for all types of people. So please do check her out. She is the owner of her firm, the Axelrod firm. She's in Philadelphia. She is a woman-owned firm, a member of NAMWOLF, which is the National Association of Minority and Women-Owned Law Firms. A rock star lawyer, a rock star champion for women, for diversity and inclusion and equity. And with that, I'll turn it over to Cheryl. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. And how nice to get an introduction like that from someone who is herself a rock star champion in the equity, equality, diversity, and inclusion space. So thank you to you. Thank you to NCWBA for this really cutting edge novel program, the Good Guys program. I was an inaugural speaker at this program. I've spoken on it many times through many editions, and I just think it's so important, and that's why I do it. Thanks to all the speakers, as Teresa said, who are volunteering their time and using their voices and their platforms to talk about these important issues. So I want to start with my why, and I think that's so important. So I'm Jewish. I'm the second youngest of 8 children. 2 of my brothers are slow learning. I'm using my words very carefully. I have heard many times people call people like my brothers retard, and it's very painful, or to hear that that's so retarded when someone does something that is seen in a certain way. So no, my brothers are slow learning, and people who you might use those words for, you should refrain your speech. I would ask you to, please. I'm also a woman, and that is going to come into play in this program. And I have a daughter, and she's a Latina, and her father is a native Spanish speaker, and he speaks with an accent. And so, like Teresa, I have seen diversity through multiple lenses, which I think actually helps in this kind of conversation to really raise awareness. That doesn't mean that I don't have bias, and I'll be talking about the fact that we all have it. We all grew up in a world in which we were greatly, women and other groups that are historically underrepresented were so greatly disenfranchised from power that we all have it, and I'll talk about that. But I do want to say on an optimistic note that I don't believe it's going to take until 2181 to reach 30% and maybe even more of equality. And I have an article, it was the cover story of the Women Lawyers Journal on that subject. And it's called The Audacity of Hope Backed Up by Data, Seeing the Paradigm Shifting. And if you go to my website, you go to my profile and you, my photo, click it, just look on the right-hand side. All my articles are free. As a condition of publication, I require that I get all rights to my pieces afterwards. And so you can click it, you can share it, you can distribute it. But I urge you to read it because it talks about why I think that. And really the great disruption of women and minority-owned businesses, I think, is going to be a huge disruptor on that 2181 number. So I'm going to talk about a lot, and I have until 3:50, and it's a 90-minute presentation. So basically what I'm going to ask everyone to do is buckle up, and we're just going to fly. And I'm going to go through this like 10 million miles a minute. So I'm going to go to, let me see, share screen. And if I do this right, I will get to my PowerPoint. Share, here we go. All right. And slideshow from the beginning. Okay. Can you nod if you see what I'm seeing my screen? Great. Okay. So this is what we're going to be talking about: disrupting bias and reaping the benefits and the rewards of it. It's going to come in 4 parts. I'll warn you that the first 2 are really hard to deal with. They're hard because the information that I'm going to deliver is hard and it's heartbreaking. But the first part is about unconscious and confirmation bias and what we know about them and what they mean. The second part is about the scope of the damage. And what I want to do to everyone in the audience is make you aware of the world you're living in, because most of us really are so socialized to the bias that we walk in, live in, see every day that we don't even recognize it as such. Then I'm going to talk about the profitability of diversity. So I'm going to turn a page and get to the really uplifting information, which is what got me interested in this. I was an economics major at Brandeis. I look at everything through the lens of what's efficient and how we could work better. And then I will end with tools that we can all use to become diversity champions if I can get through it all on time. So I'm just going to fly. So what is unconscious bias? It's preconceived ideas that we have about other people, a lack of trust that we have about other people, solely based on things like their gender, their race, their religion, their ethnic background, if they have an accent, etc. We see that bias is so strong that even the people that go into the profession, science, that is solely based on data, right? It's not your judgments, if you're a scientist, should not be based on anything but actual hard data. You run hypotheses, you do tests, and you seek to check and make sure that what you're doing is accurate. And yet the top scientists have a lot of bias. And there's a study that shows that where they were looking at identical resumes, and they were looking at resumes that had a woman's name and a man's name, they rated the man much more highly than the woman, thought that he should be paid more from a starting salary of quite a bit more. They were more likely to hire him, and they were more likely to spend time mentoring him. And this was true at the top research intensive universities, and female scientists did the same thing as the male scientists when it came to this. They had the same bias. And I'll talk about why that is. Again, we all grew up in a world in which we were so greatly disenfranchised. What do I mean by that? That's going to be part 2. All right, where do we see this? We have seen the fact that bias exists as a fact. It is not some people say, I think it's real, I feel it's real. No, it's actually been proven. The scientists have shown us. So there are proven studies that reveal this. For instance, we have had an increase of about 30% of women on major orchestras. And the reason is because bias was disrupted. What used to happen is when people would audition for a major orchestra, you'd sit there, you'd play your instrument in front of everyone, and they decide whether to put you on the orchestra. Now what they do is they audition behind a screen, because when people could see that they were women auditioning, they weren't going to get the places. Same with people of color. It has made a big difference. And in fact, what they had to do is not only put up a screen, but they had to have the women walk across the stage in socks, because even the heels walking across the stage was enough to capture the bias and make people less likely to put them on the orchestra. Now they're based on talent alone. We're seeing a lot more women and people of color on orchestras. In job applications, we're seeing a huge bias against people of color. If you have a Black sounding name, the name of an African-American looking name on your resume, it's going to take you 1.5 times as many tries on your identical resume to get a call back as if your name looks as if you are white. That should not happen. That's bias. We prefer not only people who are white and people who are male, but people who are tall. And if you look at our corporations, the concentration of white, tall, and male CEOs is just unreal. So in the United States, we have 14.5% of men that are 6 foot tall or taller, but 58% of the Fortune 500 CEOs are. And it's even worse when you talk about men that are 6'2" or taller. 3.9% of our entire country, less than 4% of men are that tall, but 30%, almost a third of the Fortune 500 CEOs are. That is bias. If anybody were to suggest that being tall, being white, or being male made you better equipped to be a CEO, I would have to say, I think that position could be quite easily challenged. All right, confirmation bias. What does that mean? Confirmation bias is where we take our unconscious biases and we seek evidence to show that we're right about them. So this was a remarkable study that was done. It's called Written in Black and White, and it was done in the legal profession. And the smart thing about this study was the study authors decided we are going to make identical memos. So they made 60 memos. We are going to, on purpose, put errors into the memos, errors in analysis, errors in judgment, lots of different errors. And we're going to send this memo to 60 law partners. And the only difference we're going to make is on the cover sheet, we're going to identify the authors as a third year graduate of NYU. And we're going to say his name is Thomas Mayer. But on 30 of the partners' cover sheets, it will say that he's Caucasian. And on 30, it's going to say he's African-American. And as you may have guessed from what I've said so far, there was a stunning difference in terms of how they were evaluated. In fact, people that thought that he was African-American were giving him far worse feedback. Things like, I can't believe he graduated from NYU. Where they thought he was white, they said things like, he shows a lot of potential. They rated him far worse when they thought that he was African-American than when they thought he was white. And again, just like in the example with the scientists, where female scientists were equally liable to disenfranchise women, people of color that were partners were equally having this kind of bias and rating the person that they thought was Black worse. So the takeaways are, we all have bias. We all, I think most of us, I would say there's a slim group that doesn't fit this mold, but most of us want to treat everyone fairly and equally. But a huge takeaway from this is we have to actively and consciously check ourselves against our biases. All right. What is this bias against women that I'm talking about? Well, I think most women, if I had a show of hands and I could see everyone and I had asked all of the women lawyers, have you ever been asked, have you ever been told you're too aggressive? You need to tone it down. You need to dial it back. You're coming on too strong. I would be surprised if not every single woman raised their hand and said, yep, I've been told that in the workplace. And if I asked the men, I would be shocked if many had ever heard anything like that. That's the difference. We are hearing women day and night differently than men, where women exercise any kind of self-possessive language, they will hear this kind of thing. Stunningly, I'm not going to play this video here at this YouTube video about the ABC News experiment. I don't have the time, but I'll say very quickly that this involved a man and a woman talking about getting a job. Now, bias actually impacts women and men, particularly women and people of color, far more when we're looking to advance, not just get a job, but get a raise, get a promotion, that kind of thing. But this video was stunning because what it had were trained actors with the exact same script seeking the job. And the people who watched it in the ABC News series, they were saying that this woman was so overly confident as to be obnoxious. Interestingly, when I posted this on LinkedIn to 1 million viewers in a major group, what I heard was the Goldilocks syndrome. The viewers either saw her as that, overly obnoxious, completely obnoxious, too overly confident, or the complete opposite. She was a wuss. She had no backbone. She needed to be more confident. And you can see that these are, first of all, diametrically opposite. So you cannot be both. And second, that there was no middle, that no one was viewing her as just right. It's that Goldilocks syndrome that you cannot be heard just fine. All right. What is the bias against people of color? It was revealed in that written in black and white study. The bias is, despite exercising equal levels of talent, people of color will be perceived as not performing equally, and they'll be rated much more harshly. They'll be viewed much more harshly and much more skeptically. All right. How is it impacting our evaluations? A lot, a whole lot. What this study showed was where we had 94 critical reviews, 71 of 94 of them contained the kind of language I was talking about. Step back, watch your tone, stop being so judgmental, dial it back, stop being so aggressive. When men were hearing this kind of negative feedback, it had been 2 times out of 83 critical reviews. So the difference in percentages is women were hearing it 75% of the time in their negative reviews, men were 2%. That's a mile divide between the sexes in terms of how we are treated. How is it impacting business inheritance? This is the giant elephant in the room in the legal profession. Nobody talks about business inheritance at most of the events that have to deal with unconscious bias, that have to do with it. In fact, business inheritance is probably the biggest way in which people get business in the legal profession. They inherit it. And what's happening is business is concentrated in white, non-diverse men who, as a result of affinity bias, the idea that I want to work with, talk with, spend time with people that are like me, give that and bequeath that business to younger white, non-diverse men that they feel a certain camaraderie with. And women are largely shut out of all of that. And it happens overwhelmingly with no disruption on the part of any firm. And it happens without the client's input. So this is a great way in which we can actually step in and put in place disruptors to bias. All right. We also see from Sky Analytics study of big data, $3.4 billion, that the bias is impacting our billing rates, and women are actually being billed out less on an hourly basis than men. And in fact, it's a significant difference. It's $27 less an hour. So, and that was years ago when Sky Analytics did this study. So this is actually, of course, against the best interests of the law firms. The law firms are, it would be better for them financially to be billing men and women out equally, but they are doing this as a result of bias. The Sky Analytics actually looked at all different ways in which you could possibly account for why this is happening and could not find any. Not a lack of experience, the experience was equal, not a lack of the women being less efficient, nothing. They looked at every single possible measure and they literally had to conclude that the only thing that we can see is it must be bias. Okay. So why do we have bias? We are socialized into it. We all have it. I'm going to talk about, trying to kind of raise your awareness about the world you're living in right now and how much bias there is. I said that most of us don't want it. Can we test for our bias? You might think, I don't have bias. I treat everyone equally. I'd love to think that about myself, but we all do. And you can actually see it at Harvard's Project Implicit, and it's free. You can go here to this site and test yourself against a whole host of different biases. Sadly, you will find that you do have bias. Even people 20 years my senior, 30 years my senior who've been doing this, that much longer than I have will actually test for bias, unfortunately. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about that world and kind of raise your awareness about the world you're living in and how full of bias it is. And it explains why it is we have these biases that were reflected in the studies I started with. Okay, so let's look at who is in power in the world we grew up in. We've had 46 presidents and none have been women. That's stunning, even in this planet that we're on, in which there is so much bias and so much disenfranchisement. We actually have quite a bit more than many developed countries. There's only been one president of color out of 46 presidents. So if we were at equality, we would be seeing about 50-50 women and men as presidents. It's almost unimaginable to those of us probably listening to this program. And we would see probably about 40% of our presidents be people of color. I mean, we're nowhere near that. As Teresa said, if we stay at the current pace, which I don't think we will, it's going to take till 2181 just for women in the legal profession to reach 30% equity. This is the result of this, having grown up in a world in which we're so disenfranchised. How else are we disenfranchised? Well, let's look at the executive in the states. Women are only holding about 30% of the state executive positions, not 50, 30. Women of color, only 18%, not even 20%. If you look at statewide legislative positions, we're talking about 30%, again, not 50 of them are held by women. If you look at our United States Congress, these numbers are terrible. If you look at it, we have, instead of 50% of our Congress people, and these should be the people that represent us, they should look like us. Instead of having 50% of our Congress be female, we have 72% are male. Instead of having about 40% of our Congress be people of color, we have 72% are white people. And just to also show you a little bit more about how disenfranchised we all are, people that are religious minorities make up a very small percentage, as you can see here, of the population of Congress. Congress is very white, very male, very Protestant, and a little bit Catholic, but not much of really anything else. If you look at the United States Supreme Court, it's as diverse as it has ever been. People are very excited about the Supreme Court in terms of diversity. Not talking about Democrat, Republican, but look at these statistics. Women are outnumbered by a factor of 2 to 1 on the United States Supreme Court. There's only 2 racial minorities, so they're outnumbered by 3.5 to 1. And there are 2 religious minorities, no one that's openly LGBT. So again, a huge amount of concentration of white, non-diverse men across our executive, legislative, and judicial branches. We're going to go into the judicial branch a little bit more as well. Here we go. Federal court. If you look at the federal judges, instead of having women be 50% of our federal judiciary. They're only 34%. So they're better than in some other areas that we see, but still way behind where we should be. And if you look at racial diversity, 73% of our Article 3 federal court judges are white, rather than having 40% be people of color. All right, this is one of my, what I would call a money slide. And what I mean by that is, if you forget everything I tell you today and you key in on a couple of money slides, please make this one of them. This is what is happening in corporate America. And I'm going to explain the slide for a minute. This is, if you look at this bar to the far left, the entry-level bar. This is where everyone is starting out in corporate America in general. So at the entry-level positions, white men only occupy 36% of the positions that are entry level. Men of color 16%, white women 31%, and women of color 17%. There's no good reason that that same bar with those same percentages isn't identical from left to right as people move up in their companies from entry level to manager to director to vice president to senior vice president and to C-level. In fact, it ought to be absolutely identical. If it weren't for the great disenfranchisement of women and people of color and all of the biases that we face, and I should add that for women who are of color, they face the double bias that I talked about. The first bias, or you could say one is first, one is second. The two biases are, one, the idea that people of color, the bias that they're less competent, and two, the bias that women are too aggressive and need to tone things down and show less assertive speech. They face both of those, women of color. And you'll see what happens to them as we move from left to right. So what happens as we move from left to right is white men keep getting greater and greater and greater percentages of the positions. As you move from entry level, they start out at 36, they go to 46, 52, 59, 67. And by the time we get to C-level, you have 68% of the C-level positions are occupied by white men. They therefore, in the process, are literally squeezing everyone else out of those positions. And you see, therefore, men of color who started out at 16% of the entry-level positions wind up at 9% of the C-level positions. Women who started out at 31%, white women, of the entry-level positions get squeezed into 19% of the C-level positions. And women of color go from 17% of the entry-level positions to an appalling 4% of the C-level positions. This is what we have to change. If we want our companies to function better, we need to look at our entry level and try to keep it level all the way across and be much more mindful of how we're treating people to get them there. Because, and I just want to say, because talent, no one has a lock on talent. Being white doesn't make you more talented. Being a man doesn't make you more talented. Talent is equally held by all groups. I would hope we would all know that. Okay. What is the impact of being steeped in this bias-laden environment? Well, we become so conditioned to our disenfranchisement that we don't see it. And I bet if I were to ask everyone who hasn't heard this presentation before, whether they were aware of differences as you rise up in companies and how much concentration there is of white men in companies, I think few people would really say I was aware of that they would, I think few people would say I was aware of how little diversity there is in the Congress, in the state executive positions, in our executive as a whole. We are conditioned to it, and it's therefore impacting our judgment. We are actually looking at women and thinking that they should not be so self-possessed. They should dial it down, tone it down, dial it back, be quieter, essentially. We think they shouldn't be in leadership positions. We think they don't belong there. And we view them as less trustworthy, and we view them as less likable when they rise, because we take offense. We think that really just jars against what we're used to seeing, and it doesn't look right to us. What looks right to us are these tall white men as CEOs. All right. We also internalize the same biases that we internalize about women. We also internalize similar biases against people of color, that they're not as competent. And we look for proof that they're not, just like you saw in the written in black and white study, and that they don't belong in leadership positions and we shouldn't trust them in it. Now I'm going to get to the much more positive part of this presentation. That was the hard facts of where we are. But what I was interested in, and I said I was an economics major, and the reason I got interested in this subject was I was imagining a different world. And this started in 2009. I wrote the first article about the profitability of diversity, went nationwide. Nick Kristof at the New York Times picked up my data and he published a piece. He didn't name me, that's okay, but he published a piece after that, and I think started really raising awareness about this kind of subject. What interested me was what would happen if we actually had a more diverse and inclusive world where women and people of color were equally treated and there was no bias and we saw them at the top. So I started to look at what data was available. And the data that's available shows me that there's so few women on boards, but where you have them, the Fortune 500 companies with the most of them, you see these returns, 42 to 66% greater returns. Those are huge returns. If you look at just the companies that have at least 4 out of 5 years had just 3 or more women on their boards. That's it, just 3 or more women on their boards. These are the kinds of returns that they got, 46 to 84% better returns. That's a huge benefit for the investment. If you look at racial diversity, very similarly, companies that are more diverse are seeing much better returns. So if you look at executive teams that are more culturally and ethnically diverse, they're 33% more likely to see better than average profits. And if you look at their boards and they're more racially diverse, culturally and ethnically, you'll find that the boards are 43% more likely to have better than average profits. So just a great bang for your buck if you invest essentially in these kinds of measures in diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion. So I saw, I'm a member of a group with Karen Pollack, who is general counsel of Transamerica, and brilliant leader. And she posted this article on LinkedIn, and it really just blew me away. So this is money slide number 2. The first one was the bars going across. This is the second one. This is telling us what we would have made as a country if we had done away with the gap between what white men make and what everyone else makes. So most people think it's a zero-sum game. And if we start treating people, women and people of color equally, white men are going to suffer. And the truth is, no, we're actually going to all do better. It's the rising tide lifts all boats kind of outcome. So if we actually treated everyone equally, we would have $2.6 trillion more if we had just done that starting in 2019. To give you an idea what that represents, that's 12% of our entire gross domestic product. That's a huge number. If we had started 20 years ago and had closed that gap then, we would make $16 trillion more as a country. That's 76%. So for all of us, that's over 3/4 more of our gross domestic product. We would all be living far better. We would all have a far better standard of living as a result economically. So why is this? Because diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams, and they do so by a lot, and they're better at problem solving. I recently authored a piece in a 5-article series, and I co-edited all the other 4 pieces on this very subject. And you can go to this link and read about this, about how diverse teams problem solve better, how they function better, how they're better in the courtroom, how they're better at transactions when it comes to legal teams. And you can register for our roundtable with the ABA that's coming up on October 15 from 2 to 4 p.m. So I'd love to see everyone attend and hear us talk about the powerful data around the better functioning of diverse teams. Why is this? Because diverse teams have different experiences that they bring with their different backgrounds, and they avoid groupthink. Those are the 2 main reasons. I have 10 minutes. I'm going to try to really quickly say this part, but if you had a table of everyone that looks like me, right? My age, I'm white, I'm a Jew, and I had a certain socioeconomic background, and I went to Brandeis. Okay, if everybody looks like me, there's going to be so many things that we are going to miss because we don't have people with different perspectives and different backgrounds who can see things I cannot. When you increase diversity by, let's say, getting rid of half of the people at the table that look like me and inviting men to the table, and then getting rid of, let's say, 60% and including 40% and including those 40% as people of color, include someone with a disability, include people with LGBT, etc. You increase and increase and increase. You literally multiply the perspective of the people at the table. That's why diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams. What it also means is for those who are interested in nonprofits, they don't care about the profitability of diversity. They're in nonprofits. The reason you find so much greater profitability in diverse teams is because they function better. And that same data will support a nonprofit functioning far better if it's far more diverse. One last thing on this slide, the synergistic positive impact of diversity. Synergistic, I want to explain it in as few words as possible, and it's hard, but synergistic comes in the medical profession when you're talking about a negative impact often. So let's say a person smokes and they are around asbestos, and say if you smoke, I'm throwing out numbers that are absolutely not true, okay? But just say if you smoke, you have a 20% greater chance of getting lung cancer. And let's say if you're around asbestos, you have a 15% greater chance of getting lung cancer. You would think that if you smoke and you're around asbestos, you're going to have the 15 plus the 20% greater chance of getting lung cancer, so 35%. But in fact, there's a synergistic negative impact because the two work on each other. And it is a fact that you will have a greater chance of getting lung cancer, far greater. Diversity has a synergistic positive impact. The people that are diverse have a multiplying positive impact on each other and on their companies. This is showing, and it's unbelievable, but these are the countries of the world, and none of them are at gender equality in pay. So this is pay from $1 for dollar, what men make, to down to 50 cents per dollar, what men make. So this is what women are getting paid as compared to men on the bottom line. On the top line, it's the global competitiveness of each country. And you can see, if you look at my cursor, it's really going in a diagonal line from left to right and low down to high up. What does that mean? The more equally we pay the sexes, the more globally competitive we are. That again goes to what I was seeing with Karen Pollock's article that she sent, and she posted on LinkedIn about how much more we'd make, how much better off we'd be if we reach gender equality. Not only that, John Acre does the same kind of thing I do. So what I do is I don't create any of the studies that I talk about, but just the way a lawyer reads a lot of cases and then synthesizes them into a brief and explains a body of law, that's what I do with the studies. And I try to put it into plain English so everyone can understand. Some of these studies are pretty long and dense. But John Acre does that too. And what he's looking at is what happens to countries that are more inclusive. And what he found when he looked at the studies are, not only do people have a higher standard of living, they're more prosperous, as he notes, but they're also better educated. There's less corruption. They're happier. There's all these additional positive impacts of equity, equality, diversity, inclusion, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you're disenfranchising women, you're already disenfranchising about half your population. If you disenfranchise people of color, that includes the women of color and all the men of color, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of people that could be treated more fairly and equally and feel better. All right. People say women should negotiate more. You should just ask for more pay. I hear this quite often, and that's the problem, right? That's very simple. Walk away. Okay, we just need to negotiate better. No, the truth is that when women negotiate for higher pay equally, we face what's called a backlash. Susan Faludi wrote about this years ago in the book, Backlash. When we negotiate for higher pay, people don't want to work with us. And in fact, some people withdraw offers. It happens more to women than to men. Women are more reticent to negotiate for higher pay for good reason. And Bowles wrote about this and Maria Konnikova did in Lean Out: The Dangers for Women Who Negotiate. It's only for women that they suffer this penalty. They're put under a microscope, and suddenly where everyone wanted to hire this person, they like their skills, they suddenly start to look at the focus on their social skills. We start forgetting about the competence and how talented these women are. And we start thinking about, we don't like them, we don't trust them, and we're looking at their social skills. And that effect is absent for men. So what does that tell us? The takeaway: companies have to level the playing field when it comes to pay and not make women negotiate. That is a bias. Essentially what's happening is, as a result of bias, we are not being treated fairly and equally when we have to negotiate for our pay. All right, I'm going to take a moment to play this ad. Actually, Christina, you are, right? Can you launch the Pantene ad, and I'll talk about it quickly, and I've got like 6 minutes, so I'm going to fly through the rest. If you can't get it, just let me know. There we go. Rock star. Thank you, Christina. So this is an ad that went viral all around the world. I'm going to explain what it's about. Okay, hit pause. Hit pause. Okay, did you see that? He's the boss. He's the man. He's the boss. She's in the exact same role, but she's bossy. Okay, please hit play. He's persuasive. She's going to be in the same exact role. She's pushy. That's how we're perceiving women. He's dedicated. Can you pause 1 sec? That mobile is to evoke the child at home. So if he's working late at night, he's dedicated despite being a father and having the baby at home. Look what happens to the mom when she's home late, working late. Please hit play. She's selfish. Same thing, same behavior. He's neat when he takes care of himself. She's vain. And he's smooth when he goes out and he's strutting and he's looking very nice in his suit. She's the show off, doing the same behavior. That's why this ad went super viral. If you could stop it, thank you. It's not really about labels not holding us back. That's not what holds us back, unfortunately. Okay, let me share my screen. Go back to the slideshow. Okay, share. All right. So the next one. Okay. What can we do in the last few minutes? What can we do to level the playing field and be diversity champions? Start by working with women and minority-owned law firms. We are the great disruptor. We are the reason that we are not going to need till 2181 to reach equality. Firms like mine, firms that are NAMWOL firms, National Association of Minority and Women-Owned Law Firms, you have to have 3 major companies rave about you to become a NAMWOL member. It's not enough just to be women or minority owned. We're only, I think, about 130 law firms across the country who have made it through the hard criteria to become NAMWOL members. So work with us. Work with women and minority lawyers as your settlement masters, your mediators, your discovery masters, receivers, expert witnesses, and AAA arbitrators. I do commercial litigation. I do employment and commercial litigation. I cannot tell you how many times I see the team of people that people put up and say, let's work with them. And it's all white and it's all male. Diversify that team that you're looking at to serve as your arbitrator and your mediator. And by the way, where you have conflicts in large law firms, that's a great opportunity to look for a woman or minority-owned firm to do your work. Make sure your vendors are women and minority-owned businesses. Other vendors, you can get your paper from women and minority-owned companies. You can get your expert witnesses, your court reporting companies, your supplies. Use this broadly to enhance business for women and minority-owned businesses. Pay women and minorities equally. So make pay transparent. And you will find that making pay transparent has a great positive impact on getting people to be paid more equally. Set up a fair and equitable system in determining who is going to inherit business, which, as I said, is a huge, probably the largest factor in impacting women's ability to get business and succeed and be paid equally. and grow and thrive in the profession. Audit your reviews. Look at your reviews. Are people saying in the reviews, and it will happen not just with men, it will happen with women, not just people of color, not just white people, people of color. Look at your reviews and see, is there she needs to dial it down and tone it down and dial it back and stop being so aggressive kind of thing in women's reviews? Are there allegations of a lack of competency with people of color? I'm going to bet you there is in both. So look at your reviews and see what's happening, and have conversations with people that are that are demonstrating bias in their reviews, and have training so that people learn to look for this themselves, and pay people better, the partners that better retain and better promote women and people of color, because they're enhancing your organizations, as we saw. They make them more profitable. Yes, also make sure your advancement process is clear for everyone. So everyone has the written criteria for what it takes to advance. Build in unconscious bias training and sponsorship training, and ensure that your equity partners are diverse by gender and race, so that you show that you value diversity. I'm almost done with like 2 more minutes and I'll wrap up. Partner compensation can be tied to diversity metrics as set out here. You can elevate the firm's head of human resources to a strategic role. Make sure that they have experience with unconscious bias and training and the like. Make talent management experience one of the criteria. Make sure every committee is tasked with making hiring and advancement decisions has a fair representation of women and people of color, and make sure you're not typecasting women and people of color into roles that are less visible and pay less. Last 3 things are place, echo, and promote. These are my tools based on the data. I came up with these tools that are copyrighted based on all the data that we've talked about. So what are these tools everyone can use? You don't have to be at the top of the firm. Place, echo, promote. Place is when you see an opportunity for a woman or minority, whether it's a publication, a speaking engagement, recommend her or him for that. That's placement. Place them in it. Echo. This was so powerful that in President Obama's, during his term, it helped the White House achieve gender parity among the president's innermost advisors. Echoing is where somebody is in a group setting and there's women and people of color, where a woman or person of color both makes a comment and it's great, echo it. Say, for instance, Kiwana Smith just recommended that we should do bias training or whatever. I think it's a great idea. Repeat it as if no one heard it, because they probably didn't. Give her all the credit for it. Say her name. You'll, by the way, be making an ally in the process. And then promote. Speak highly of other skilled women and people who are from historically disenfranchised groups. You can also directly promote to partnership and the like, but also you can speak highly of them, and anyone can do that. All right. In the process, you'll be developing your coalition of allies, and you can work together to help level the playing field. This is my contact information. It's been my honor to speak with you, and I can't wait to hear the good guys talk on their panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I think I take it over from here. This is Shiloh again. I thought it was really particularly appropriate, Cheryl, your comment about rising tide lifts all boats, because I'm looking out at the ocean here in Portland, Maine, and it seemed pretty perfect. Do just really quickly our Good Guys moment. And if you were here in person, we try to honor all of the champions of DEI who are on the call and everything. If you were here in person, it would be very exciting. We'd have you all stand up, we'd clap for you. We've had ribbons in the past that honor you. Here, since we're not in person, I just want to ask that, say to you, thank you. We'll do it virtually. So if you're a member of a diversity bar association, if you've written an article about DEI, if you've mentored a woman or a historically underrepresented person, if you've taken a first step towards becoming a good guy by attending the program today, if you've done any of these things, we thank you, we applaud you for doing that. We like to really think that all of us attending today shows what progress in DEI can look like. And so thank you to everyone for dedicating what little time we all have to this issue. We appreciate it. And now we're going to turn it over to our panel. And I have the great honor of introducing Joan Fortin, who is the CEO of my firm, Bernstein Shore. We are one of Maine's largest law firms. Joan actually joined our firm as a summer associate. She founded the firm's DEI committee, among many other things, and is now the first female CEO of the firm. She's also a frequent speaker on current events and their impact on the legal profession. So discussions of ethics, equality in the legal workplace, the importance of female leadership, embracing change, many things like that. I've seen some TED Talks. I could spend a great deal of time talking about all of the accolades that Joan has earned during her career. I'll note a few. She was named one of the women to watch in 2018 by Maine Biz, and she was named as a Maine Women's Fund Call to Action honoree in 2020. So Joan also has 2 adult children, and we should know in her free time, not surprisingly, Portland, Maine, she can generally be found outside, near, in, or on one of Maine's many lakes, rivers, or streams. And Joan, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you for being a part of today.
Thank you, Shiloh. What a wonderful program. I'm so honored to be here. That was a really wonderful talk, Cheryl. Terrific job. I have the pleasure of talking with these 4 wonderful men who have come forward as good guys and are willing to share their experiences with us. And really, I'm going to try to do as little talking as possible because you are here to hear from them. And I think they have some really important information to share with us. So I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves. So just to make things smooth with the panel, I will call on them in order. So I'm going to start with Ben Wilson, who is the chair of Beverage and Diamond. Ben, could you just tell us a little bit about your background? I'll ask each panelist to introduce themselves and then we'll go to the panel. So Ben.
Thank you, Joan, and it's a pleasure to be with everyone today. I'm a native of the Deep South. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, where I grew up, and I've been practicing law for a very long time now. And our law firm, Beverage and Diamond, has 8 offices across the country. What is unique is that our practice is focused on environmental law. And so we like to say we are to environmental law what the University of Connecticut women are to basketball. In this particular sport, we think we're pretty good at it. And but I'm thrilled to be here and to learn from the men and women who are part of this program. And just very quickly, terrific presentation. Cheryl, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben. Next, I'm going to ask Bob Bodian to introduce himself. He is the managing partner of Biasladen. Bob.
Thanks, Joan. Thanks, Cheryl. That was really interesting and really a fantastic presentation. I had the privilege of doing this a few years ago live when it was in San Diego, and I thought it was a great program and was happy to be asked to do it again today. Unfortunately, it's virtual, but it's good to be here. Biasladen is 540 lawyers on the east and west coast of the country. We have a very broad practice. And I'm happy to say that Vault just voted us one of the top 30 firms for diversity in the country. So that was a nice honor we just got very recently. And Nargis Kakalia, who's probably in the audience somewhere, is our first head of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have that. We have our head of diversity sits on our policy committee, and some other things that we think are proactive that I'll talk about during the course of this program. But it's a pleasure to be here, and so happy to be invited.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bob. Next, we're going to go to Jeff Fireman, who's the Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary of Front Door, Inc. Jeff. Oh, we can't hear you, Jeff.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Joan, for that. And I made the famous Zoom.
We've all done it.
So, as Joan said, I'm the Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary of Front Door, Inc. Front Door is a publicly traded corporation, actually headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee, even though I live in Connecticut. So go UConn. Front Door is a leading provider of home service plans in the United States. Actually, we cover over 2 million homes in the United States. We operate in a number of brands. American Home Shield may be the one you're most known about. Prior to going to Front Door, I began my career as an attorney in Washington, D.C., office of Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, before moving in-house in New York City to help Weight Watchers develop one of the first subscription businesses on the internet. I eventually became the executive vice president and general counsel of WeightWatchers.com's parent company, Weight Watchers International, which is now called WW International. More recently, and particularly for those of you in Maine, I served as executive vice president and general counsel of IDEX Laboratories outside Portland, Maine. For those of you who are less familiar with IDEX Laboratories, IDEX is an S&P 500 company and a leading provider of animal diagnostics in the world. So if you have a cat or dog or a horse or a cow, IDEX has touched you in one way or the other. It certainly is an honor and privilege to be here today to speak with all of you and learn and share and really explore the opportunities we have in a DE&I for our legal profession. So thank you for having me.
Terrific. Thank you, Jeff. And last, we're going to go to Vince Swaski, the managing partner of Harris Bricken. Vince.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I want to second or third or fourth a great presentation comment. That was really amazing. Maybe that could be a TED Talk or something, but I'm also very happy to be here. I'm probably the most junior lawyer on the panel, I'm guessing. I've got 11 years of practice and I'm managing partner of a firm called Harris Bricken. As Joan just mentioned, we're a smaller firm too. We're about 30 lawyers. I'm here in the Portland office. Got a few offices. The biggest one's in Seattle. We have an office in LA and then attorneys scattered to the winds in international locations. We have a few lawyers in Spain, a few lawyers in China. So kind of a different model for a law firm, but it's a neat law firm and we work closely together and we're kind of proud of what we've got going as to the DE&I efforts we've made. And I'll look forward to talking more about that and just learning to hear what everybody else has to say on the panel. So thanks again for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vince. And thank you to all our panelists. I'm going to just jump in. I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to go across my screen. So the order will be a little bit different, but I'm going to start with you, Ben. And the first question to each of you, I'd like each of you to answer is this. Is there a personal story that you would be willing to share about why diversity and inclusion is important to you? So a personal story about why this is important. Ben.
Well, actually, it starts with how I came to become interested in the law. I believe I began by stating that I was a native son of the Deep South, and I grew up in a period of segregation. And I knew personally several lawyers who did remarkable things. One was Wiley Branton, who handled the case on behalf of the children who integrated Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. Another was A.P. Turow, and you guys are familiar, those people in New England, with Norman Rockwell and that famous photograph of the little black girl in a pristine white dress, books and ruler in hand, escorted to school by 4 headless U.S. Marshals, an errant tomato against the wall, and a racial epithet scrawled thereon. And that was A.P. Turow who brought that case. And there was Fred Gray in Alabama, who represented at 24 the 26-year-old Martin Luther King throughout his civil rights life. There's Donald Hollowell in Atlanta, and there was Alexander Luby in Nashville, who represented students who were part of the Freedom Rider movement. They were remarkable people. But the one that I perhaps remember most was a woman, Constance Baker Motley. I'd never met a woman with 3 names before, Joan. And I thought she must be a physical giant because she would do what men would not do. And I remember seeing her with her client in the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. That client was James Meredith, and he was attempting to enter the University of Mississippi. And when I finally met her, I told her that story, that I thought she had to be a physical giant, alluding to Cheryl's earlier comments. She was an intellectual giant and a great power. So those people inspired me, and I saw what a difference they'd made in the lives of others. And I was hoping in a small way in the legal profession, I might make a contribution. So that's really where it started for me.
Thank you. Wow, that's great. Jeff, what can you share for personal background in terms of why diversity and inclusion is important to you?
Well, I have to say, slightly different story, but I was inspired by my 2 older sisters. and the challenges they encountered in their own careers. One is a banker, one is a doctor, so not in law, but very similar in many ways, I think, to any profession. And really the difficult circumstances, decisions, and choices, frankly, they had to face. It was not easy for them, and I watched firsthand as a little brother of the youngest of three, take on, the difficult challenges, particularly as navigating their professional careers, which they're very deeply committed to, but also being working moms and trying to navigate, the circumstances they found themselves in. It was immensely inspiring for me, but at times very disturbing as well. A short little, story and just a piece, and many things that Cheryl said in her presentation really capture this. I remember my sister, who was a doctor, sharing to me as oftentimes early in her career, she would be doing rounds, possibly in a new hospital with a new group of doctors, and immediately they will assume she was a nurse, not a well-trained, Ivy League trained doctor. And that really put her in a very uncomfortable position, because oftentimes there might be a chairman or more senior person that she had to speak up, once again, maybe viewed being as aggressive, or other than that, and just correct, I'm not a nurse, I'm actually a doctor here, and I have every right to everybody else to be there. So that's kind of a little story about what inspired me. And then over their careers as they developed, the conversations and the boundaries they needed to set to ensure they had really the opportunity to be there for their families as well as grow their careers, really was amazing. And as I grew up in my own profession, in the legal profession, I certainly saw that, frankly, I did not have to have the same conversations. I did not have the same challenges that they had. I, particularly as a younger professional, I hate to say it, easier. And that really is what really shaped me, and is why I have a passion for D&I, and why I'm, very happy to be here today.
Thank you. Vince, I won't repeat the question, but what are personal stories might you be willing to share with us?
Yeah, so I think, even ever since I grew up in the Midwest, I'm kind of isolated, and it was kind of white, it was male dominated and all that stuff. And for whatever reason, I was always just kind of interested in other people and other places. And I kind of dedicated a lot of my 20s basically to just backpacking around the world and working odd jobs. And I lived abroad, and I figured out how to do those things. And it was really enriching. And I just continued to seek that out. And then it transitioned into a really personal story for me later when I got married to my wife, who is South American, and she came to the US, I think around the age of 25. She basically learned English here, and she went through a master's program here. She's awfully smart, she's awfully articulate. She's an engineer by training and by certification. And I kind of began to understand, and this was probably like 8-10 years ago now, before I'd even heard, or we'd been talking so much about the term implicit bias and those sort of concepts around that. But I experienced with her just certain difficulties and instances and episodes that really kind of challenged me in how I thought about that stuff. And at first, I think I used to be more willing probably to give people the benefit of the doubt and sort of almost explain away behaviors, which I now realize is inappropriate. And just by being around her for so long, I kind of came to realize things. And her job was that she was a consultant for a large insurer. And what she would do is go around rural parts of Oregon and inspect the workplace facilities from her engineering perspective and say, you're using this giant machine wrong, or you're doing this and that wrong, and it could impair the worker's safety. And she would write reports back to the underwriter. But oftentimes she would be met with a lot of resistance by the business owners from the moment she walked out the car door, because of who she was or how she looked, or even when in her initial phone calls with her, she has a heavy accent. She's awfully eloquent and awfully smart, but she has that accent. And I think she just was always starting from a relatively moored position as compared to people like me, to keep using these nautical metaphors. So I've kind of learned that throughout the course of my relationship with her, even now, like when we have to call and get something done and we're having a difficult customer service moment, or she says, why don't you take the call? You're probably going to get the benefit of the doubt. You don't have this accent. You don't have this kind of voice. And sadly, I think she's right sometimes. And then it kind of keeps going for me, because we have a daughter now. She will be 4 years old this fall. She looks like her mom. She looks very ethnic, and she's going to grow up speaking Spanish, but she's not going to have the English accent when she speaks our language. But I think, she will probably have some hurdles. And I like that the world's changing, and I like that people are coming around. But I think about that stuff a lot just in my family circumstance, and it bleeds into the work environment in a good way, hopefully.
It's very real and personal to you. Thank you for sharing that. Bob, do you mind sharing your personal experiences that motivate you to be involved with equity, diversity, equity, inclusion?
Yeah, not at all. As Vince alluded to earlier, I'm old, so I appreciate that. Um, I was thinking about that. I think the big advantage is I qualify for the booster shot, so I've got that going for me. But the yeah, it's sort of from a much different angle. But when I was young, um, I had a lot of relatives, grandparents, and others who I talked to and spent time with, survivors of the Holocaust, and most of my relatives didn't survive the Holocaust, and it gave me a keen appreciation of what bias and prejudice could do in the most extreme circumstances. And I always just grew up with this sense that it's wrong, and it doesn't matter what group it is, women, blacks, other people of color, Muslims in our day, and whatever it is, I have this innate sense that it's inappropriate and just not just. And so I've always had that. I started at Simpson Thatcher out of law school, and the reason I started at Simpson Thatcher was actually that I wanted to go to a significant, Wall Street firm and practice litigation. And Simpson Thatcher both had a very prominent Jewish lawyer in the 1940s when none of these firms had any Jewish lawyers, and also had the first black partner in 1969, a guy named Conrad Harper, at any major law firm. So, that influenced me, and things like that make a difference in terms of having role models and having appropriate role models. And a little bit of a flip the script, Conrad actually ended up as one of my mentors, and so I had that advantage and that experience. But I never felt it was right. I've always sort of had that in me that obviously different groups face different prejudices, right? And for blacks it's obviously different. You're kind of always black, and that's people can see that. So it's not the same thing, but the idea of it against any group is just abhorrent, and whatever I can do to be helpful, in my position, I try to do. So I take that with me. Even Mintz Levin itself was founded in 1933 by 3 Jewish lawyers in Boston who, because of their ethnicity, basically religion, were told, at a white shoe firm in Boston, what are you guys going to do next? Because you can't obviously be partners at a white shoe firm in Boston. So even the firm's DNA of the firm itself contains that kind of bias. And so, and the firm, it's in our DNA, and we're very aware of it. And now it's other groups being discriminated against, but it's the same idea. So
Thank you,
important to me.
Bob. Actually, so Shiloh and I are with Bernstein Schur, and our firm has a very similar history. We were founded by Jewish family members who weren't able to get jobs at other firms in Portland, and they had to found their own firm back 100+ years ago. So we have that very same background. I'm going to ask you, my next question is kind of a combo of 2 questions I had in mind, and it's similar to what I just asked you, but I want to focus on the difference. I asked you about what got you interested, or why do you care? My next question is similar, but a little bit different. What got you motivated to take action? Because I think we can all think about people who are good people in their hearts, they care about a given issue, but there's something that motivates some of us to care enough to take action. So what do you think it is that motivated you to get involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion? And if you can't think of a specific thing, kind of a related question I'll just tuck in there is, was there an influencer in your life who kind of pulled you along? So I know you talked about why you care, but let me ask you why you act. Ben, I'm going to start with you again.
Fair enough. Well, in terms of a specific instance, I recall a shareholders meeting at our law firm. That's what we call our partners. And I'll never forget someone, we were justifying why we had such a poor record on diversity. And someone said we only recruit at the top 10 law schools, and we only recruit people who are law review, law journal, order of the Coif, and former federal judicial clerks. And I recall saying, well, you know, I just looked this up. We have 46 law schools represented at our law firm. There can't be 46 in the top 10. And quite frankly, maybe 25% of our people went to those schools. And maybe 25%, generally those same people, but not exclusively, were law review, law journal, or federal judicial clerks. And so the truth of the matter is we were not who we said we were. And then I did something that a very bad actor does in all of his movies. I didn't take my shirt off, but Matthew McConaughey always asks you to close your eyes. And he asked a question. I said, well, who are the top 5 or 10 lawyers in our firm? And of course, lawyers being lawyers, they said, well, what's your criteria? I said, you make up the criteria. And as they thought about it, I said, I bet you they're not all top 10. They're not all men. I hope they're not all white male. And I think they got the point. So I think that was what happened there. And from a personal standpoint, my wife, I met her the first day in law school. And then as now she was smarter than me and tougher than me. And but she's African American, and she encountered far more challenges and difficulties than I did. And but I can remember the courage it took for her to go to work every day, and what she did to help provide for our family. And so part of me wanted to make certain that others like her did not have that situation. And I will just jump to a very quick bottom line. I can recall several people, attorneys of color and women in my firm, who were not faring as well as they might because they did not have a full plate of work. Okay. And so I'm the chairman of my firm, as you can tell, not for my good looks or my intelligence. And but I have clients, and clients may be tall, dark, and handsome. And I'm none of those things, as you can see. And but I was able to give work to people so they had a meaningful opportunity. I was able to put them in the game, and also to show them how to build and grow their own practices. See, I don't think you can just wait for the inheritance. Okay, that may happen for some people. It's not going to happen for women. It's not going to happen for diverse attorneys. And then finally, I've attempted in my own way to bequeath clients and relationships. I'm 70, and it's the first time I've said this, I'm retiring at the end of the year. And yesterday, I have about, well, over 50 clients, over 50 matters, and over half of them are going to women, attorneys of color, LGBTQ plus attorneys. They know who they are. The clients know who they are. And to the extent they need an introduction, I intend to make it. And so that's one other thing I feel compelled to say, because I'll forget if I don't. Going back to Cheryl's point, she had a slide. I think she said we'll get to 30% by 2081. Our firm's at 35% equity women partners. So, and I think this is 60 years ahead of 2081, but I'm proud of that. But on the other hand, like she said before, why isn't that 50? Because 50% of our lawyers are women and minorities. So we have work to do. We all have work to do. Thank you.
That was a fabulous answer. And you are an inspiration, Ben. Thank you very much. Let me go to Jeff. What motivated you to take action?
Yeah, I can echo that, Ben. You're an inspiration, so thank you for sharing. There's many reasons that motivated me. From the personal side, I just shared about my 2 sisters, certainly, but if I kind of think about the core of it that motivated me, it's just the right thing to do. Cheryl in her presentation went through a lot of good reasons, and many of them, and the one that, really touches me, at least in my professional side of my career, is we are working in a rapidly changing global economy. It's really the most innovative and the most creative businesses will survive and thrive. And legal services, as much as we want to say we're kind of sometimes in this little silo here, we're not exempt from that. And we need to be equally innovative and creative in their counsel. It's table stakes. It's a table stakes as a consumer of legal services, as a general counsel. It's my expectation, and it's the expectation I'm placed on me by my colleagues, that we have to be the most creative and innovative in enabling our clients' businesses, as well as mitigating risk. And you can't do that if you don't have the best, the brightest, the broadest views on solving problems. And that's really what motivates me very much. And I think about that because otherwise I'll be short-sighted. My company would be short-sighted. And frankly, if we don't have that diversity of approach, diversity of thinking, experience, and with all that comes innovation, creativity, and frankly, new ways of approaching issues and problems. So for me, this intuitive kind of core business sense is what motivates me for my personal reason. Now, in terms of, Joan, your question about ACT, I have to say the one that really stirred me on is a more recent story. And it actually comes from my 16-year-old daughter. And she just, I get choked up, frankly. Her past year, she participated in what they call the National History Day competition. And some of you may know about it. It's an amazing competition of high school and middle school students. And she did her presentation on the freedom rides. And she did very research, and she spoke particularly with one of the founding participant of CORE, which is one of the founders and originators of the freedom rides from 60 years ago. And it was watching her do it, watching her kind of ask questions, because frankly, she's a 16-year-old kid, white girl. She doesn't necessarily have hit the gender bias, maybe that many of you have experienced in your professional careers, live in a very, I would say upper middle class town in Connecticut in terms of that. And so she hasn't been seeing, maybe the ugliness of the world so much. And this was a time for her to see the ugliness, and seeing how she took it in and really inspired me. So if you want to say my hero, why I'm acting today, is really my 16-year-old daughter. And frankly, I want to act because she's just now talking about her own career aspirations. And I want to make sure, as her dad, and a very proud dad, that she has every opportunity. So
Jeff, my daughter is 18, and that choked me up as well. Thank you. I appreciate that. Vince, what spurred you to act, do you think?
I think, well, I've talked about my family circumstance, but I think just to our firm, it's pretty cultural. We're a smaller firm, like I said. We only have 3 owners. Bricken, it's Harris Bricken. Bricken's a woman. She's amazing. She's a dynamo. Dan Harris is, I guess he's a religious minority. He's Jewish. And then there's me. I'm the only one who probably doesn't check the box. But we talk about it a lot. And sometimes when we, and we're kind of like how partnerships are, like we argue sometimes, and Hillary will sometimes say, I'm sick of you guys and we need another woman up here with me. And then we're like, yeah, we agree. We just got to figure that out. And we think about that a lot when we find new lawyers in the firm. We tend to hire a lot through headhunters, for example. We have long-standing relationships with probably 3 or 4 headhunters, and they, we go to them when we have a specific need. For instance, we just needed a few weeks ago something specific. We needed a litigator who was licensed in both Washington and California and had like 8 years experience and a few other things. And so we're kind of like, you're probably a little hamstrung in like who you can find us, but their general marching orders are, and they all know this, if you find a cool, qualified, diverse lawyer, even if it's not a practice area we're advertising and promoting right now, could just talk to us. Please just bring that person over here so we can talk. We're a very good marketing firm. We will find a place for these people if at all possible, and we will market these people and we will promote, because I think it makes us a lot more attractive as an employer. I think it makes us a lot more attractive to clients. I know we tend to punch above our weight with clients. I like to brag about that, but we've had to fill out, what do you call them? Like RFPs essentially for people who want to hire you. And the last one I saw last year was Chobani, and they want to know, how many women owners do you have? what's the percentage breakdown of your law firm by X, Y, and Z, minorities, LGBTQ, everything. And you have to answer those things. You answer them honestly, and it's a big, compelling sort of plank for you to get to work if you can check some of those boxes. So I think it's good from a business perspective. It's great from an employee retention perspective, and we just feel more comfortable being around other kinds of people. It's almost, frankly, a little bit embarrassing if you're just a whole bunch of waspy people like standing up there in those pictures in the bar magazines or whatever. I mean, it's been set up now so that it's almost a competition to be diverse, especially in a place where I am, like Portland, Oregon. It's so liberal out here, and I like that. I think it should be like that. And we're just trying to do right by people, good business practices. I can't really see any downsides to it, to be honest. And I don't know why it's not more of a no-brainer for people.
That's great. We need many, many more firms like yours. Bob, you want to take that question?
Sure. I mean, I pretty much echo what's been said, and Jeff, I think, spoke for everyone saying it's the right thing to do. I think we all feel that that's the essential, element of what we're doing. It's the right thing to do. As I mentioned, in our firm, it's kind of in the DNA of how the firm's always been, and it's a legacy that I felt the real need to, and desire to keep on going. Going back to, as I said, the formation of the firm, we were the first firm to provide same-sex benefits many, many years ago. And then the other side of that, besides that it's the right thing to do, is that it's the best thing to do for the firm and for our clients. Cheryl mentioned groupthink. There's a story that I've told. I'll try to tell it really quickly, but it's a groupthink story. But I was in with some friends in London several years ago. The New York Jets football team, or as close to a football team as we have in New York, but the Jets were playing in London, and so it was at Wembley Stadium, and so a friend of mine is basically the CEO of the Jets, and so we all went to London, and we're knowledgeable football fans, and a lot of the local people going to the game were less knowledgeable. They're not really American football fans, so we're watching the game, and it was hard to follow. So one of the people said, one of the fans of the stand said, why don't they paint the football like bright pink, so when you're watching the game you can follow like where the football's going. And my friends and I said that's a really good idea, and we all thought that was. And then somebody from sitting in front of us who overhears this from London, who doesn't know anything about football, right, wouldn't ordinarily be in the room, says, wait, but isn't the idea to hide where the football is so the other team doesn't know where it's going? And we thought, oh yeah, we hadn't thought of that. And so it just was the perfect example of you have an insular room of people that think they know what they're talking about, and you don't have the outsider in the room, and that happens all the time. And not having that voice in the room, you just you feed off of each other, and you don't get that outside approach. And obviously, we're talking about things much more important than the color of a football, but that's the truth of it. And so, we do it because it's the right thing to do, and we do it because it's better for us and our clients. And that's kind of how I see it.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you. I want to ask you all a question that relates to the concept of bystander intervention. I know at my firm, we've done quite a bit of diversity training. And one of the questions that a lot of men in particular have asked, but women have the same question too, is when you see something, how do you respond in a way that isn't just going to shut down or embarrass the other party, the speaker maybe? I've heard some people talk about calling people in versus calling them out, because we want to open a dialogue and make progress, but there's still that awkward moment where you see or hear something really inappropriate. How do you as a leader respond to that? I think I'm just going to mix up my order. I'm going to go in the other direction just so I'm not making Ben go first every time. So I'm going to go right back to you, Bob, if you want to take that first.
Sure. So one thing I say to my partners and everyone at the firm all the time is talk to your partners, not about your partners. One is more productive, one is more fun. And so, talking to someone directly solves a lot of problems. You ask questions, you listen, you get perspective. So, it's important to engage. If you hear something that's off, or you have a comment, or you have some criticism, you do it privately, you do it directly. You don't talk to others about it. And 90 something % of the time, like, you work through it, and and it works out. So, I mean, that's my basic philosophy on that. And I think it works pretty well, just talking directly to the person, not embarrassing them. And also ask questions before you say something. Right. Maybe someone missed a meeting, or someone said something that seemed off, or they're, or they're short with somebody. And instead of like jumping to criticize them,
Okay, I'm not sure what happened there, but Vince, why don't we,
I think
Bob's back.
I'm back. Yeah. So, ask questions before you jump to conclusions, so you can understand where somebody's coming from. Maybe something traumatic just happened to them the day before, or maybe they're going through something. So, make sure you understand what the situation is before you jump in and make comments about it.
Great, thanks. I'm going to go to each of you, but if you feel like the answer's already been said, just go ahead and say that so that we can keep moving right along. Vince, do you have anything to add to that? How do you
Yeah,
deal
I
with
think
the
so.
intervention?
Well, we talked to them. I had an example that came to mind when you asked that question, and I think it's important to remember that a lot of that stuff is kind of, it's subtle, right? As we learned in the presentation, and it's kind of code words and euphemisms and dysphemisms and things like that. And I remember one situation where we had a very senior lawyer and a much younger associate, and she's a woman and she's Asian, and he was characterizing her work to us, or her contacts with a client, in an email to my other partner and I. And he said, the problem with her is she's just very timid. She's not timid. She's thoughtful. I mean, she's smart, and she sits and she waits. And when she speaks, you better listen, because she's thought about it and it's right. And she's a great lawyer. And we basically had to talk to him about that and say, think about that. You've got an idea about her. She's speaking when it's time to speak. She's speaking appropriately. Her input's brilliant. You couldn't do half the stuff without her. So you've got to just reorient your thinking. And we basically had that conversation with him. And then we had a conversation with her, like, on the side, are you comfortable working with him? And there have been a couple of comments he made that were kind of personal comments about your disposition and things that we didn't necessarily agree with. We've all worked with you. So we just kind of went and talked to each person. And sometimes I think that's the best you can do. And it's a hearts and minds thing. And you may not even always succeed, but at least you do your best to address it.
Sounds a great approach. Thank you. Jeff, do you, how have you dealt with some of these situations, if any?
So I have to echo Bob and Vince in many respects here. I think a couple of things I've dealt with. One is oftentimes listen before you speak. And I think that was the crux of what Bob was saying. But more importantly and it goes back to, is not just talk the talk. You have to be a leader. You got to walk the walk. And you have to lead by example. And you have to demonstrate the importance of these issues. You can't just ignore them and put them in a back room, because it's not just the one person, it's the influence that comment may have had on multiple other people. So with that, in my mind, and the way I approach it is think about ways you can raise awareness and understanding. I'll tell you a personal story from Front Door. In light of the George Floyd and the Me Too movement, we did an unconscious bias training, and I could not echo more than what Cheryl put in her presentation. If you've ever have not done that, it's amazing, eye-opening. I consider myself enlightened, but I learned a whole lot, and it was great doing it with a bunch of colleagues and hearing the real stories of things that you didn't think was happening in your very own kind of, I would say, virtual world, no, but in your home, in that sense. And that was really eye-opening. So it's not just talking to the individual, it's also making sure you send the message that if it is an understanding, because sometimes it's inadvertent, it's not, people are not self-aware, but at the same time, making sure you not just leave it there, but you make sure you clear the proverbial air.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Ben, do you have anything to add to intervention?
Only
On the
that,
topic of intervention?
very briefly, only that Bob and Vince and Jeff are far smoother than I am. Listen, I attended the Tina Turner Proud Mary School of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. You may recall she says things can be easy or they can be rough. And I'm sure she was referring to this. And but I can think of 2 or 3 instances. One involved an openly gay male associate in my firm, and we were working on a significant project with a number of other firms. And one fellow appeared to be seeking to intimidate him physically, you know, the way guys used to do in high school when I was in high school. And I recall becoming uncomfortably close to the bad guy. You know how the boxers get in the ring and they're close enough to kiss, but that's not exactly what they plan on doing. But I wanted him to know that that behavior was inappropriate, and I wanted to check it in a manner that he understood. He understood. Another instance, I had a white male partner, speaking of a black male associate, let's call the associate's name Robert. And the male partner says, you know, Robert doesn't seem to be getting it, Ben. I really don't know what to do. And I said to the male partner, I said, male partner, do for him what I did for you. And Joan, he looked at me quizzically. I think that means like he didn't know what the hell I was saying. And I said, do you remember the such and such a case where you didn't do whatever? He said, oh yeah. I said, well, you got another chance, didn't you? And remember client X where you're getting 50% of the credit? I said, that guy went to school with me. So do for him what I did for you. I think it's important for leaders to call in their favors, to use their bully pulpit, to use their, you know, not every firm, not every person in a firm is converted on DEI. We have early adopters. But I think to get those people there and to get them to set the example, and of course, as others have said, it's critically important. And I don't want to, I thought Cheryl only had about 15 great specific suggestions. One of the ones that I particularly like was her PEP acronym, you know, and this business about echoing, speaking up, attaboy, attagirl, call it whatever you want.
Amplification.
Amplification. And you got to tell somebody. So that's what I think.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And
Go ahead, Bob.
just to follow on that, I thought that was great. And well, I would say less boxing, you know, in your face. I had something fairly similar, which was gender based, and I called the partner in my office immediately, shut the door, and basically said, like, you can act that way, but not here. So I'd like you to think about it overnight and come to my office tomorrow morning and let me know what your preference is, like to stay at this firm or to act the way you're acting, you know, pick one. And that partner ended up, you know, with the firm, you know, to this day. And, you know, you got to keep it simple and straightforward, which has been what you're saying. Like, it's not, you know, don't beat around the bush and just get to it. And, you know, there's so much else to be done in terms of direct examples. You know, on the what was it, PEP? Was it place, echo, and promote? But you know, the amplification or echo or place.
Yep.
You know, you've got to put people in the positions to succeed, and that's what, as leaders, we need to do, and we need to be mindful of that. Just the other day, I suggested to a friend, you know, one of my partners who's diverse woman, Black woman, be put on a board, you know, because that gives opportunities to meet people and to make a contribution. Obviously, her talents will make it well worth it for this board, you know, but you have to go out of your way and recognize these things, and it's a lot of it's a one by one thing, you know. You do an individual by individual. But
I can see very clearly why the 4 of you were invited to be on this panel. You're a very inspirational crew. I had set 4:40 as the time for my last question, but I have what we had decided was the last question and what I think people want me to ask you, so I'm going to combine them. What I wanted to ask for the last question is if each of you could come up with some manageable, concrete steps that you think other people could take, other men could take to help promote women and diverse lawyers. But one of the questions in the chat that I think people want to hear about is, what has your firm done? We've heard from Ben quite a bit about what he's doing to promote women and diverse lawyers. So you can combine that if you wish, a combo of what you've done and what you recommend, or if you haven't yet done some of these things, but you have something you strongly recommend, I'll let each of you answer that how you wish, but we've got about 5 minutes before we have to wrap up. We're actually going to go to a question and answer session, but we've got about 5 more minutes. So one answer from each of you, if you would. Concrete steps, either that you've taken or that you would recommend, even if you haven't taken them. Let's start with Jeff this time.
Well, I don't have a firm, but I have a mini firm within a company. And
Right.
when I took
That
over Front Door about 3 years ago, I inherited a legal team, and we were not diverse at all. We're all white males. I'm Jewish, but that was about as much diversity as we had, which is some, but not really what I think we're talking about here today. I'm very proud to say, now we are 3 years later, I have more than half of the lawyers in my team are women. We're much more diverse in terms of other characteristics than we were before as well. And it's not at the exclusion of hiring the best and brightest. We have white males and we have females and we have all people. But I do believe, and I think this goes to your original question, what steps you can take, is you got to make sure when you are recruiting, and this is the most important, and it's no matter whether it's out of law schools, whether it's mid-years or even, at the partnership, but make sure you have a very diverse slate of candidates, and make sure the group interviewing that diverse slate of candidates is equally diverse. You got to level the playing field, and you got to make sure of that. And that's one of the things I've done. The other thing is, you can't just stop at the recruitment. You got to make sure once they bring them in, you put them into a position for success. And that means mentorships. That means connecting them with other people, making sure they have, ways in which they can hopefully achieve and within your organization or team.
Awesome.
Or firm. So that's
Thank you. I'm going to stop you only because we're almost out of time. To make that kind of change in 3 years, I have to say that's pretty impressive. Good job. Vince, you want to take this question? Concrete steps?
Yeah, I think, and maybe this is easier for a smaller firm like mine, but you can be a little bit flexible on your policies, because I think if you have certain kinds of policies, like let's say you have 3 months PTO or something like that, that may tend to affect certain people disproportionately to other people, specifically women, right? Like we all know women are the ones that have children, and we all know like COVID's been a lot harder on women because they have a disproportionate amount of household responsibilities, for better or worse, even professional women. So you can kind of look at that. You can talk, I mean, we kind of go on a case by case basis. We say, yeah, we have the employee handbook on the one hand, but, oh, you're pregnant. That's excellent. Let's talk about it. How much time do you really need? Like, what can we do here? How can we work with you? Because we want the people to stay for a long time, right? We don't want them to, we don't want to say, oh, you got your 3 months, get back here, get billing, like, and then, they get burned out, or it's just too much. And you have to realize that not everybody has the same situation when they step outside the workplace. So I think that's one of several things you could do. I'll leave it at that in the interest of time.
Awesome. Thank you. That's terrific. Bob, concrete steps.
Sure. So one thing that we did, certainly for an AMLO 100 firm that was very, I would say almost revolutionary, was, I think Cheryl alluded to it a little bit, but the origination credit of these firms tends to reside in the older white men, highly disproportionately. And we completely changed our origination credits so that A, no one could get all the credit for anything, and B, it's by matters. And the whole point of that was younger, diverse women in particular who tend not to get credit. We got a lot of recognition for that across the industry, both I did and the firm, by changing the way origination credit is done so that younger, more diverse partners are actually getting the origination credit, which tends to be the coin of the realm in terms of how you're compensated and recognized and otherwise. So that was a real concrete step that was totally outside the box, and was accepted by the older white men who tended to have the credit. And so that worked really well. And then the only other thing, on Juneteenth, after George Floyd, I issued like basically 10 items that we were going to do at the firm, and and we've been working on those. But that included increasing our Black attorneys by 50%, and we're within 2 years, and we're well on pace to do that. We have a seat on the policy committee for the head of the diversity committee. We closed the firm for election day. Gave everyone the day off. About 65 of our people were active in the polling places and other things. So there are a lot of concrete things that we've done and that we're doing, and hopefully we'll continue to do more of those.
Fantastic. Ben, bring us home. I know you've already talked about some concrete things you've done, and if we want to go straight to the questions and answers, that's okay, but I didn't want to leave you out if there's anything you want to add.
Well, I'll tick them off very quickly. Our firm is part of the Mansfield program. We're on this Mansfield 4.0. We're active with the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity, and Jeff Fireman would be terrific there. It's a group of general counsel, and Bob and Vince would be equally terrific, and managing partner types. And these are the true believers on diversity. And MCCA has a history of this. I liked what Cheryl said about taking a diverse team on a pitch, but what I like more is when we come back, sharing credit, as Bob said, for the business that's been originated. And that's absolutely essential. And then when you come back, tell the story about how we won the war. Lawyers are good at that, and make certain that your women and your diverse team members get a chance. And then finally, I think that keep looking for opportunities for people to shine. I have a story of a woman in my firm. She was in mid-30s, and she told me she was pregnant. And I said, "Are you happy about that?" She was a little sheepish. She said, "Yes." I said, "Well, if you're happy, I'm happy." And then there was a women's organization she wanted to join. And by the way, I would hasten to add, join NCWBA. But, and this woman joined the National Association of Women Lawyers. And she asked me, as my daughter sometimes used to when she lived with us as growing up, can I join? Of course, she didn't need my permission to join, but that was really code for, will you pay for it? And I asked how much, and she told me. And I said, do they have a litigation section? Do they have an environmental section, which is what we do? She says, I'll check. I said, if they don't, start one. And then I asked her, what's the least expensive meal of the day? She thought. I said, it's breakfast. I said, we should have a breakfast in every office and invite the women who practice environmental law, whether they're in our firm or not, to come to that breakfast once a quarter. Let's be the place for women who practice in this area. And I'll never forget, she called me. I was in New Hampshire for a board meeting. You know how you get up there in Manchester and you lose your connection. And she says, just north of Manchester. And she called me, not since my daughter called to tell me she was engaged as a young woman, called me so happy, but she'd gotten her first client at this women's conference, another woman. Awesome. And her energy was so powerful. So let's look for opportunities to empower people. And I'm inspired by what Jeff and Vince and Bob are doing.
Thank you, Ben. You men are really amazing. I'm going to turn the driver's wheel over to Teresa, who's going to handle the questions and answers. Before I sign off, I just want to thank you for sharing your personal stories and your really inspirational work that you're doing. And thank you. Teresa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Joan, and thank you for being our moderator today. You brought out some great information from our panelists. Well, the goal of Good Guys is to inspire more male leaders to be like our Good Guy panelists today, to instill that appreciation and dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion in more male leaders. Because I think we can all acknowledge that many are not as dedicated as our Good Guys panelists today. So the question is, what do you each think we can do or you can do, or anyone can do to bring on another male leader to share your dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion? Anyone want to jump at that question? Jeff,
jump.
maybe?
I'll jump.
Okay.
I'll jump and the rest bring us home.
Yeah.
Ask. It seems very simple, but it's really just ask. Show your passion for this. I'm inspired, Ben, you inspire me. So, and as well as Bob and Vince, I mean, show the rest of the world there are people, there are good guys, as you let's put it that way, and go from there. I think it's just ask. It'll be amazing how the responsiveness. That's how I got involved with Good Guys. Phil Rudolph asked, and
that's right.
So.
Right, and Phil Rudolph is one of our Good Guys influencers today. And yeah, I asked. That sounds great. So ask a guy to come to one of these programs. Ask a guy to be on a panel for a Good Guys program in your organization. Vince, what do you think?
Yeah, I just think get the word out. And I just, as an aside, I'd be happy to pass you a couple of other managing partner type guys after the call if you want to do another panel. But yeah, I just think keep promoting it. If you've got a law firm with strong messaging capabilities, use the bully pulpit or the megaphone to broadcast this stuff. I'd be happy to post this up on our blog, for instance, and our social media. And I think just, the more it's in the air, the more chances you are for somebody to kind of bump into it and think it's interesting and want to hopefully emulate it. So nothing real mind blowing, but those are my thoughts.
Wonderful. Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Jeff and Vince just said, and internally, we pumped it out at the firm, and so the male partners certainly know this is important to me, and they know I'm doing this, and we make a point of letting people know. I can't see who's here now, but I know when I did this in San Diego several years ago, a good number of the male partners and associates attended that, and understanding just what it means to me in the firm, hopefully inspires them to act accordingly and step forward and be heard on this.
Fabulous. So Bob is using his bully pulpit to bring along other good guys. That's great. Ben, what do you think?
Well, I wish I could improve on what has been said. I can't. And I like the suggestions that I made. I would go back, though, to something Cheryl said. I've never had a client hire me for the old college try. They hire me to win. And they define win. I asked them to define it. It's the first or second question that I ask. And so I think if you're interested in winning and your team is bereft of women, you're not competitive. And if you're interested in winning the work of Jeff, get an opportunity to work with him, it's important to him. And think about how law firms work. If Jeff says he wants the bill on the first of the month, he'll get it on the first. If he wants it on the 15th, if he wants it electronic, if he wants it on green paper, we're going to give it to him just the way he wants, in the words of Fats Waller. So I think that our clients have a huge say. And if I can slightly disagree with Cheryl, I believe it is important, not all the time, but at appropriate times, to negotiate the terms of your relationship. And I think that a lot of times men get away with not responding in a manner that they should, because someone has not asked. And I think there's a way to speak up for yourself without being a pain in the neck. And it's important to speak clearly. And I think that if you can't, there will be other places. And last time I looked, coming out of this pandemic, we are all looking for people. And there's a battle for talent. The legal profession is fighting to get people. There's fewer people applying to law school, fewer people taking the LSAT, all of that business. So you can believe young people that are aware of their value, I think can you can extract some good from us. And the final point, you guys spoke of your daughters. I have a daughter too. I never got interested in women's sports until my daughter started playing volleyball and basketball and ran track. And nothing gets a man more interested in issues for women faster than having a daughter. And half of all men who have children have daughters. So I think reminding them in a tactful but clear way. Do you guys remember how Scout reminded one of the lynch mob, asked him about his son? You remember that? It says, how's Billy doing? That wasn't his name. I can't recall the name. And the man was ashamed and he acted accordingly. So I submit to you that if we do speak up, and sometimes men need to speak up, you know, you don't have to be a woman to speak up on an issue or to care about issues that relate to women. You don't have to be Black to care about issues that relate to a Black person. And the young people that I meet today, they don't carry the biases and the prejudices that I grew up with, you know, and they are like Jeff's daughter. They're like your daughter, Joan. I like that. I like that they are better than us. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. I am going to turn this over back to Shiloh to close us out.
Hi all.
Or am I?
Sorry.
Oh, maybe I'm supposed to
Yes, I
close
was
this out.
closing
Oh,
it
I think
out.
I
I'm
am.
in the conference room with a bunch of the ladies from the board of NCWBA, hence the masking. But thank you everyone for attending. As I said earlier, this is such an important issue and we are so thankful that you chose to spend some time with us today. I appreciate it and wish us luck with the lobsters and some sunshine this weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, all you good guys. Thanks, Joan. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Good program.
Great job, panelists.
Thank you.
Great job. Just
As
wanted to say it
usual,
was a joy
Cheryl.
to listen to everything that the guys
Yeah,
said.
Ben, Jeff, thank you so much. I think we already lost Jeff and Bob, but fabulous, fabulous
You guys were
program.
amazing.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
you guys. Now I'm leaving now.